My essentials joke is I'm not supposed to be here, but I am.
Yeah.
So every joke contains that kind of mission statement, that idea, the DNA of that. I think every comedian has that identity. You know, what I think for Jerry Seinfeld is it me? And every joke that he tells has that question in it.
Yeah.
So when you figure that out, it's actually much easier to understand, like, oh, this is just the same joke, but it's over and over. So you figure out the initial element of what you're trying to say, and everything comes out that way.
You're listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman, a T. Torrance Productions original podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Kurt Newman, staring at the world today with 5-time Grammy Emmy nominee, All-American Girl actress, you know her, you love her, Margaret Cho. Hey everybody, I'm Kurt Newman, and we are staring at the world with a 5-time Grammy and Emmy nominee. She's an actress, musician, she's a writer, director, social activist, what I call a creative entrepreneur, really. And she is also listed as one of the 9 best female comedians according to Vogue magazine. She's an All-American Girl. I want to welcome you to the show, Margaret Cho.
Hi.
Applause.
Applause.
Thank you for being here. As I said to you earlier, we're here today recording this show on the day that politically is extremely interesting in this country, where the Supreme Court has overturned the Roe v. Wade precedent in our system. And so it's just like, I can't help but feel, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that today or not, or if it's affecting you as much as me. I'm more angry about the legal decision than just taking people's choice away. But I didn't know if you wanted to say something yourself.
It's so infuriating, but it's also important not to lose hope and to understand that there's just this weird notion that everybody in this nation is somehow Christian, and we're not Christian. We're not all Christian. We're not. And they're like, oh, Democrats this, Democrats that. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an anarchist. Atheist, revolutionary. I only side with the Democrats because it's closer to what I believe. But certainly, it's like at least I can play in the same realm as Democrats. Yeah. But the idea that we all somehow have to adhere to this make-believe Christian God, which is from a make-believe book that doesn't even talk about abortion in the book.
Yeah.
Just like these weird riffs that people have laid on to the track later on. They've overdubbed these weird riffs on life, and either that or they must support really, really late-term abortion, which is wait till people are grown up and going to school and kill them with guns. That's the weird message, is that this has nothing to do with life, because if they actually cared about life, they would actually do something about the gun violence.
Yeah, I'll tell you my 2 gripes with it. I am not pro-abortion. I would never take that stance myself. I love my kids. I loved having them. I think kids are a great positivity in this world. So, and I'm not Republican or Democrat either. I'm of the party of trying to find some common sense somewhere in this world. But what really got me about it was the legal system, which I tend to refer to as the illegal system, because it was just nuts today to say you're going to base a decision not on a legal precedent, but for the first time in our history, we're going to wipe out a legal precedent for someone's opinion of the Constitution. Right. And that's not any system I can really get behind. Anytime somebody says, well, I didn't see this word in the Constitution, therefore you can't have it. Well, cell phones aren't in the Constitution either. Does that mean we get rid of them? We get rid of planes, trains, and cars too? I mean, it makes no sense to say my opinion is going to have more weight than a legal precedent. If you're going to make a decision, make it at least on a legal precedent. Don't tell me you're going to make a decision on something that's just your opinion. I didn't see this word in there, so therefore it must have no standing. I hate, nothing enrages me more than our legal system and how it's not functioning and how we really don't have any good rights unless you have a good amount of money. The wealthy people have a lot of rights, and if you don't have a lot of money, you don't have justice, and I had lawyers spell that out to me early on in my life that, anything like justice is or the right thing that you believe in is really expensive, is how he put it to me.
It is.
And that's just
it's
nuts
true.
because there's other systems around the world that don't function that way, that you can actually make your case to a judge, have them make a decision for you without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. And anyways, so that's my enragement. And I think, secondly, if we're moving down a path where one white-haired white man in Washington can kind of make a decision for everybody else, that seems to me we're moving more towards a dictatorship, which I'm really not for at all. I really like the idea of America having lots of voices and lots of us having tolerance. And my feeling on it all is like common ground is our only choice. And if you don't agree with me, you haven't really thought it through. There's finding common ground, or there's just the end of our species, kind of, because there's no other choice. If we're going to fight and fight and fight, it's going to get to nuclear destruction. We're all dead. So finding the common ground that we can work together is going to be our only option. And the more we put that off, the more we're in trouble. So that's my enragement for what went on today. Again, I am not pro-abortion. I just think that we're going the wrong direction, and this legal precedent was ridiculous. Anyways, we're here to talk about you and your career today. I listed a lot of things you do. You do a lot of things which I think is perfect for this show. Where Staring at the World was a lyric from one of my songs, and it was about we all stand at a different spot and a different perspective, and we're raised in different places, and that has a lot of influence on how you see the world. And so you're kind of a shining example of that. I'd like to talk, if you could talk about how you were raised, where you were raised, and what was going on there, because it seems to me that was really an extreme, different childhood than like someone in the Midwest like me might have, or somebody else somewhere else might have, that being raised on San Francisco West Coast the way you were. Tell me about it.
Well, I was lucky because I was really in a very progressive place, which really formed my identity. I grew up in San Francisco. My parents owned a gay bookstore. And, part of that is because my father is very handsome, and male beauty is South Korea's primary export, as evidenced by bands like BTS and all of the K-dramas. And so he was an early adopter of the handsome Korean man, and he loves male attention. So we had a gay bookstore, and he put a lot of people in my life who really formed my identity and my worldview. The early supporters of Harvey Milk. The Harvey Milk assassination was one of the biggest first traumas in our lives. And then after that, the devastation of AIDS, which brought me into early AIDS activism. And I also started my life in stand-up comedy. And so that's where I was doing a lot of stand-up comedy, doing a lot of AIDS fundraising through performances, going to shows, punk shows, the Rock Against Reagan shows in the 80s, which is like so incredible to see, like the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and Husker Du and all these people at the Vats in San Francisco, which is like a old brewery that has been co-opted and turned into a punk venue. Yeah. So it was a very good time to be young, be political, be in San Francisco, be queer, and learn about the world.
Right. I mean, there's a very big Asian population on the West Coast, for one, so that's totally normal to you growing up as a child there, and then far more progressive thinking and hippies and drugs and all that kind of stuff seems somewhat normal. Someone's growing up in a very conservative area in Ohio or something like that is going to have a totally different perspective from the world. So I think it really opens up your eyes to different opportunities and different things you can do with your life. And I think you answer this question for me, but you kind of turned to a creative lifestyle early on. Is it because it seemed like a natural thing that you could do around you, or was there some other reason that really sparked, like, that you needed, whether it was comedy or music or anything like that, that it really was something that was lighting a spark in you?
I think it was just looking for a way to survive. The most formative years were really around learning how to live with AIDS and learning how to live amongst the destruction and death around that. And I remember in the late 80s, I was at the bottom of Dolores Park, and I met Brownie Mary, who was this very infamous woman. She was an old lady who would bake marijuana brownies to give to AIDS patients in hospice, right, to help them with the wasting syndrome. And she was getting arrested constantly. But she was an early AIDS activist and an early cannabis reform activist. And she was kind of like the Mother Teresa of AIDS in San Francisco. And she was like a fan of mine. And she gave me a pot brownie at the bottom of Dolores Hill, and I'm still high. It's like in 88, 89. I'm still high. I think that, when you're met with somebody that is so important that way, and she passed away in 1999, I think, but she was like sort of like one of the reasons why we have legalized cannabis in this country, in most parts of this country. And so it's a very, I don't know, that was a really formative experience. But growing up in that time of AIDS, in that time of this limited view of what is diversity, not seeing Asian people on television, but seeing them all around me.
Yeah.
Being in sort of service to progressive politics, being in service to the gay community and being part of the gay community, all this really helped me shape how I would view everything.
Yeah. And I read that you were kind of severely bullied in your youth as well, and I can't help but believe that comedy, music, those things, those creative endeavors are a way to even deal with things like that in your childhood. Do you think that had some influence in your comedy, or that you needed to speak up about this?
Well, I think that's what helped me be a performer, because when you are bullied a lot, then you're like looking to find witnesses to your suffering, in a sense.
Yeah.
So performance is the place where we're actually safe. People who are outcasted find a real safety on the stage because you're protected by the gaze of everyone. And so that's a very important tool for healing. I think that a lot of times people are afraid to be performers, or that the big fear to speak in public, and yet people who are ostracized often find a lot of comfort in that. So yeah. I think that it's almost like a very common thing. Like anybody who is a performer, especially an exceptional artist, they're usually somebody who's come from a past of bullying, a past of ostracization and isolation.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I wasn't bullied as a kid, but what I was really good at was being invisible. Like I could just be not noticed in a room. But the first time I was on stage playing music in like band in school, I felt that safety place up there immediately. It felt so much nicer to be up on stage than to be sitting in this crowd of people somewhere out there. And people will ask me that, like, do you get nervous being on stage performing? I'm like, no, I feel great when I'm up there. It's being in society that makes me more uncomfortable. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I have social anxiety. Yeah, I have pretty pronounced social anxiety with, just groups of people in a social setting. But when I'm in performance, I'm totally fine. Yeah. I mean, it's very normal for me.
Yeah, and it's strange how performers feel that way. You either feel that way or you don't, kind of, is what I've noticed. Another thing I
Mhm.
want to talk to you about, though, I saw it written down that it said your grandfather was a Christian minister and you grew up in the church. Is that true? Is that like, how did that affect your
Yes.
childhood?
Well, that had more to do with participation in um, immigration communities. Immigrant communities often found solace within the church, not for spiritual reasons, not for the Bible. Really, it was so they could see people their own color and speaking their own language and feel safe. And so that's really what that church life was about for my family. Um, they would congregate, and there was a very famous church in San Francisco that was called Kamnikohe, and it was in Chinatown. And the banking systems were through the church because nobody believed in like putting their money in a bank. They all like pulled their money. They were in somebody's mattress and they would
Yeah.
move the mattress every couple of months. And it was very much their own society that they built. And so the church really had much more to do with that than it did with any kind of spirituality.
Hey everybody, my favorite energy bars are back. Be Bold bars from the founder of Stacy's Pita Chips. Be Bold bars are refrigerated energy bars made with delicious ingredients like nuts, nut butters, chia, honey, and maple and cinnamon. All 4 flavors are delicious on purpose, gluten-free, dairy-free, and plant-based. You guys know how much I talk about the bars, that being so delicious, a great way to fuel your body, get good stuff in your body. Stacy, the founder, was on our show a few weeks back. It was an incredible female entrepreneur. She started her own business. Now she's talking about her Be Bold bars, which are delicious. I love these bars. Their mission of being bold. So here's the deal. We're going to give you a chance to try them out for 20% off. If you use the code BOLD, BOLD, for 20% off all 4 flavors at BeBoldBars.com. That's bold for 20% off at BeBoldBars.com. It's interesting, though, that that's part of your perspective when it's mixed with everything else that was going on with you at the time in San Francisco. And I wonder, when I was reading about you, I couldn't help but feel like you must have felt like you had, and maybe this was part of your comedy or your thinking behind it, was that you had to try to spend a lot of your time almost explain to people what it's like seeing the world from where you're standing, as like you weren't the same as everybody else out there. Everything you saw on TV, it was different, and you were going to try to get people to maybe open up their minds to what that felt like.
Yes. I think that was the beginning part of my career in stand-up comedy, that it was really about introducing myself. And then now really it's about learning. So now I'm learning more about the next generation of Asian American queer performers. And that's a really great place to be in, to be able to see the accomplishments of them. And they were inspired by what I was able to do. So it's like now I'm able to just sit back and listen, which is really powerful.
Yeah. Some of what you do, I don't know the real term for it, but it almost strikes me as shock comedy is what I call it. Like you say stuff on stage, and I've watched not just you, but like Bill Burr and Ricky Gervais, people like that will say these things that you're just like, I can't believe, they're saying that on stage. But is there, is that a technique that you use to really like almost you're pouring cold water on someone to wake them up or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're taking the temperature of society and you're trying to gauge what is happening socially, what is happening politically, the dynamic of what is shock value and what is really transformative. What can we learn, and what can we learn by people's reactions to things? So I think it's like really we're asking audiences to really think about what their reaction means about who they are and what's happening in the world.
And while some, performers used to have to care about an audience reaction, it almost seems like now it's not about that. It's like, I don't give a fuck what you think, really, because we need to talk about this. We need to approach this subject somehow. And I'm going to approach it with comedy to make you all feel comfortable, but we need to be talking about this.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I think it's good to be confrontational. And I definitely come from that punk rock place of wanting to be confrontational, wanting to have that shock, but at the same time to have meaning behind it. And at the same time, it's still just comedy. So there's something very noble about the profession where you're just trying to make people laugh, which is very joyful and childlike. So I think there's something beautiful about that.
Yeah, I've heard other comedians say that too. Like this doesn't need to be a negative thing. All we're trying to do is create some laughter in this society. And like I said earlier, what I do when I go and play, I try to get everybody to sing together in a room. And I often will, towards the end of the show, say, you notice how there's no division here? Like, it doesn't matter what side of an aisle you're sitting on. We're here to kind of come together with some positive energy and do something together. And what an amazing thing that is, that art can actually do that for people. And we don't have a problem if we just let go of all that negativity for a moment and come in here and laugh or sing and do something creative, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have this podcast, is just to keep pounding away at that with people and say, this is so important. And I think that's what comedians like you are doing out there. Here's something though, when ABC came to you with All American Girl, that was in the mid 80s. That was, do you feel like that was a little almost too early for that show to happen?
Well, it was definitely very exciting, but it was so revolutionary at the time. And then they only had 3 networks, and Fox had just started. So we were just the first of our kind, and it was just so dramatic that our appearance as an Asian American family was really a very shocking thing. But I'm really grateful for the people who really tried to crusade to make this happen. It's an incredible thing. It really gave a lot of Asian American artists now the first vision of themselves on television, which was really transformative for them. So I'm glad for it. I think it's really, really, really great.
Yeah. But it was a bold statement too. Say All American Girl, right? And I just couldn't help but feel like if it was on Netflix now today, it probably would have been like more widely accepted a show, as it was probably pushing the limits too much for people back in the mid 80s.
Yeah. Or it was 1994.
Or mid 90s. I'm sorry. That's correct.
Yeah. Historically, it was very shocking, I think, for Korean Americans, because the last time they had seen themselves were on the rooftops of their buildings during the LA uprising in 1994. So after the Rodney King verdict had been read out, and there were big mass demonstrations in South Central, that was a huge thing that happened. And so Koreans were so unused to seeing themselves. And suddenly there was sort of this appearance on television, and I, not being a man, not being straight, not being college educated, not being any of these things that are very important to Korean communities for their kids to look like. I was really a shocking presence.
Yeah. Well, I think it would have been, sometimes that's the way it is. You do some art and it is pushing boundaries at a time when society's not ready for it. I think it was one of those things. I went to your YouTube channel and was really, impressed by the amount of material you have up there. But the music videos I wanted to talk about a little bit with you too. I'm not sure when, was music always kind of there in your life? Or is it something you came to later on, or was it always going to be something you were delving into?
No, I started playing piano when I was about 7. I've been in different bands since then, like just with my family, with my parents are both musicians. So music has actually been more of a constant in my life over time. And then I've always been like friends with musicians, like you hang out with musicians. We have the same schedule.
Yeah.
So you often like are touring, and then you'll see like somebody is in town the same time as you are. And then like what's great with comedians is when we're done with our sets, we can go to their shows and they're just starting.
Right.
So it's a perfect relationship. And I've been able to be really good friends with lots of incredible people over the years and collaborate with lots of different amazing artists.
I'll read off some titles. My Puss, Fat Pussy, I Want to Kill My Rapist, Eat Shit and Die Intervention, and many more. When you're coming up with those ideas for those songs, are they kind of random, or are you just really trying to like make this is something I need to say right now because of something that's going on in the world or in my life, or what kind of inspires those?
I think it's just like you want to write things that are alive, that are in your brain. And for me, songs are really, you just catch them. Like, you know, it's like there's a stream going by, you just catch them. It's never like sitting down and writing something. It's really usually fully formed, and it's just the motion of getting it.
Yeah.
Because the melody structure is there. It's right there. Yeah.
My Puss seemed like you were talking to someone specific, though. Were you?
Well, that's a song that's like a very, it's actually a cover, oddly, not a direct cover, but it's a response track to My Dick, which is a Mickey Avalon.
Oh, right.
Dirt Nasty track. So that was more a riff on what they were doing. But it's one of those things you catch it and you don't really have, I don't know, that's the with songwriting is it's much more ephemeral than even joke writing. It's really
I get that. I literally dream songs sometimes in my life. I had to roll out of bed and put something down on a tape recorder because it was there in a dream. So I get how that works. I just, sometimes I didn't know if you're approaching it from like, here's subject matter I need to speak about, and so I'm going to do this video for it, this song for it, or not.
Yeah. I wish that it would be, it was that methodical. I've never been a songwriter that was able to write in that way.
Yeah.
It's more, I really just, if I aspire to catch it at the right time, then I'm able to. If I was more open to it, then I would do more.
Right. And I also noticed something on there that I wasn't sure if it was something really deeply personal you were saying, or if it was kind of performance art of what you're doing, but the 12 Days of Rage videos that you put up there too, can you explain to me about those?
Well, it was really to try to explain how common sexual abuse is, and that the privacy and secrecy we have around it and the shame around it is really of no use to us, and it was really just a way to amplify this idea. And this was a pretty revolutionary thing back then. This is before Me Too.
Yeah.
Now it's much more acceptable for people to talk about these experiences. But this was quite a few years before that. And it was so, to me, it was really just this idea of, let's make this very public and try to destigmatize all of these experiences for people to understand. Like, because it mostly came from trying to talk about it in stand-up comedy and people being really afraid to listen to that. So it was trying to warm up this idea of like, let's actually talk about it in a way that is structured but safe. Yeah,
it's really difficult. One of my daughters came out after being molested, and I was shocked at the 50-50 kind of audience out there of, I believe her, I don't believe her kind of mentality. And I'm just sitting there looking like, what's not to believe here? You had a child talking about a 50-year-old man, who laid it all out for you. What's not to believe? But yet, I don't know if it's just making people uncomfortable, or they have some personal issue with it, or what it is that they really struggle with hearing that. Like it just destroys something for them, that they're just like, I don't want to hear it, or I'm just going to not believe you instead. And it's like, why would a young girl make this up? Like, what does she have to gain?
They wouldn't.
All of society coming at you about it. It's a no-win for the girl who talks about it. And yet we continue to shame people for it. It's a terrible, terrible situation. So I think it's great that you're talking about it. I think it does a real benefit to our society. I wanted to ask you, though, you have so many kind of comedy tours you go on, and I don't know this about comedians, but they tend to have to build almost complete different shows every time they go on a big tour, and like musicians get to go and play their old favorites and stuff still too, but do you have to build complete different themes every time you kind of figure, I'm going to go on a new tour, I'm going to build new jokes, and it's going to be a whole new show? Do you have different themes for all your different tours?
Yeah, and you know, it's to me it's helpful to do that just because I really thrive on that reinvention.
Yeah.
But I also think that comedians have an essential joke that they're basically finding different ways to tell for the rest of their artistic life, which is essential joke is I'm not supposed to be here, but I am. Yeah. So every joke contains that kind of mission statement, that idea, the DNA of that. I think every comedian has that identity. You know, what I think for Jerry Seinfeld is it me? And every joke that he tells has that question in it.
Yeah.
So when you figure that out, it's actually much easier to understand, like, oh, this is just the same joke, but it's over and over. So you figure out the initial element of what you're trying to say, and everything comes out that way.
Still, I find comedians, for the most part, not all, but many of them, to be very intelligent people, because you really can't come up with making a serious situation funny without a really great perspective on life, you know? Like, to understand, I'm going to make this funny, you've got to be really smart.
Or unexpected, like you just have a different way of viewing it. And also you have a childlike heart where you can find the hope in the situation, because laughter essentially is the unexpected breath that you take that ensures life for the next moment.
Yeah.
So it's really that, oh, I'm going to live. Like, it's like, I'm going to survive. It's to say that kind of unexpected thought that keeps you going.
Yeah. And, you know, you've got a long list of movies and TV shows that you've been in, done, starred in, all kinds of different roles you've gotten awards for and nominated for. The same kind of question here. When you're taking a role, is it just like, oh, somebody wants me to work, I'll work? Or do you look for roles that you can really kind of, I get this, I understand this, I think I can make a difference by doing this? Or does that ever come into play with you when you're taking movie, TV roles?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's both. And it's also now what's the luxury of it is time, and trying to manage the time that I'm trying to be out on the road and do stand-up comedy, but also take these roles. Some of it, like a lot of the last 2 years has been spent doing acting stuff because touring has been impossible to do. Yeah. So that, in a sense, was a good time to do a lot of movies and TVs and stuff. And but now being back on the road, it's a time management and trying to figure out what I can do and where I can do it.
Yeah. And I want to finish up here with asking kind of where you're going now. What's coming up next for you? I think I read that you have some production company stuff that you're working on, or some other ideas. Is there anything specific that you're working on now that we should look for?
Well, I'm doing a couple of different television. I have a couple of different projects that I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to figure out what they're going to be. Doing a stand-up comedy tour, and so I'm on the road, and basically just trying to navigate what the next steps are going to be in terms of figuring out where activism is going to live. I feel like with the overturn of Roe v. Wade that we're going to be having to look to actually figuring out how to get this back, like how to make sure that we don't lose marriage equality, having so many rights lost. This is a very insane time. So I was trying to figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, it was. I don't, my feeling about Supreme Court is it makes no logical sense to have a political agenda if you're going to be a judge of any sort. That I would rather have a computer making the decisions rather than people, because it just goes against all logic. That's this whole thing of the legal system is supposed to be blind, right? It's supposed to be about the law, and if you have some political perspective, you shouldn't be doing the job,
Right.
But you're right. These are crazy times, and America's pulling itself apart. I don't understand why. Like I said earlier, I think common ground is our only choice, and we better get busy finding it and coming back together. I think you and me are trying to do things in art that will get people back together and remind this country, our citizens, what we have in common, which is laughter and music and singing and humor, all these things that are important to our culture. So I appreciate you coming on the show today and speaking to us about it all. And I hope to see you down the road somewhere one of these times.
I hope so.
And
yes, thank you
so much. Take care of yourself out there, all right?
Thank you.
So long. Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview. That was really insightful. Someone who's working out there in the art world doing music and acting and comedy, trying to make the best of everything, trying to get us all to understand what it's like to be a little bit different from your own perspective in this world. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. I hope you can share it and you can download it or you can subscribe to it. We'd love to have you. I appreciate you listening every time, and we will continue to make them as long as you come hang out with us. So thanks again.
Thanks for listening to Staring at the World with BoDeans, Kurt Newman. Please be sure to download, subscribe, rate, and review, and keep listening wherever you get your podcasts.